Hey, everybody. Welcome back. We've got another episode tonight. This is a special edition episode. We are going to use tonight to introduce and have a first look at our brand new M.Zuiko 20mm f1.4 lens. And if you aren't aware, this is the very, very first product that we have with the new OM system branding on it. So it's a collector's item. If you haven't pre-ordered yet, you got to get in on that, right? So tonight, just like every other night, we're going to go through some slides and then we're going to have some Q&A at the end. We are, of course, recording this so you can replay it later. And I would like to introduce our two super awesome guests that are going to share their experiences shooting the 20mm lens. So in my corner, Matt Suess and Frank Smith, welcome.
Thank you.
How are you guys doing?
Thank you.
Doing great and looking forward to this evening.
Yeah, that's going to be fun.
I'm really excited. Let me see if I can pull. Whoa, I just pulled up all the comments. Hello, everyone from Montreal and Calgary. Oh, we got all the Canadians. Chicago. Where are you guys based out of right now while we're live?
I am up in Bozeman, Montana.
Nice. I'm in the thriving metropolis of Center Valley, Pennsylvania, right outside of Allentown, between Allentown and Philadelphia.
You're up there. Is it cold where you guys are yet? Or is it still mellow?
Once it gets to like minus 20, it'll be cold up here.
It got up to about 62, 63 degrees here, so I'm not complaining.
That's nice. Yeah, it's like 60 here. Sorry. It's like it's our good weather season in California. We got a lot of Canadians in here tonight. Hello, all of our Canadian friends. We've got some people from Germany, Denmark. All right. So tonight we're going to share some images, right? We're going to go back and forth a little bit and share some of your shooting experiences and different styles of photography you were able to do with this new lens.
Yeah, definitely. It's a real versatile lens, and we've had this lens for maybe a week or two, and so we've both gotten out and got some great images to share and some stories and some tips on using this.
Yeah, nice. Anxious to talk about it. It's really a fun lens is probably a good way to describe it for me.
Yeah, super small too. I'm very excited to see some of the images that you guys have made in such a short amount of time. These guys only had this lens for what, a week, right? Just over a week. And the photos that they have created for you guys tonight are just awesome. Shows a lot of different things that they do. And like I said, at the end, we'll be back on. We can do a big Q&A at the end. So if you have any extra questions that we didn't get to while we were going through, make sure you add those again at the end. So I'm going to pop off here because everybody sees enough of me every month and let you guys get going. So.
Perfect.
All right, fantastic.
Thank you.
You want to talk about the size of this first, Frank? Let me go ahead and switch over to my other camera. I have this all lined up, and this is one thing that I love about this 20mm lens is the size of it. And you can see it compared here with the 17-1.2, the 25-1.2, and just a size reference from the 75-1.8. And this fits in really nice between that 17 and 25. And I really like that size, being able to just carry that around and be indiscreet and, sort of behind the scenes photograph. And what did you think about the size of that, Frank?
So absolutely. And if you can see this, here's the image, or here's the actual lens with the new branding on it too. Just amazing. Literally, I have been putting this thing in my pocket when I've been out and about photographing, and it's beautiful from that. I love the versatility as it relates to the size of this thing here, because for me, I'm in some challenging areas at times, and to be able to just have that thing in my pocket, or more importantly, right on the lens, right on the camera rather, it is just it's a lifesaver in many respects.
Yeah, and what do you think about the 20mm focal length? At first I was like, whoa, 20mm, that's a little odd, and it's a 40mm full frame equivalent. But then I remember I have an old Canonet camera, rangefinder camera that I used to love shooting, and I looked at it and I was like, oh wow, that's 40mm too. And then it's actually a lot more versatile millimeter focal length than I think people may think right off the bat.
I think that's a great point. And I have to tell you, I had the same questions at first. I thought, 20mm, of course, full frame, 40mm, how is that going to fit into what I do? And, a lot of people say, well, that's a great street photography lens. And I think for both of us, we're more in the outdoors area, and how would that work? And I have to tell you, it actually is pretty close to what our human eye sees. I mean, the typical in the past has been 50 millimeter, but I am primarily a wide angle shooter for the most part. And so the extra on that part of it actually works well for me. And the other thing, a byproduct that I wasn't expecting or hadn't thought about too much, is I'm doing more and more video work, and the 20 millimeter is really a sweet lens as it relates to some of the video work. So that's been a real nice addition to it. So for me, again, finding more and more opportunities, of course, paired with the fact that it's so darn tiny.
Yeah, and the fact that it is a pro lens, it has all the weather sealing features of it, so you can shoot out in the rain, not have to worry about that, dust, all of that. And I'll tell you, it is well built. I mean, it is a nice, solid feeling lens.
Well, why don't we jump into some of the images here, and maybe that'll help us with some of the talk throughs on it. And I guess before we do that, Michelle asked us to just talk a little bit about ourselves, what we do shoot. And for me, I'm an Olympus visionary and have been fortunate to be in this role for a period of time. And people ask me, where's your studio? And I say, just open the door. That's where my studio is. I'm an outdoor photographer. For the most part, I do some studio work, but the bulk of what I do is in the landscape arena, nature arena. Travel is a big part of what I do. And beyond that, I also do a fair amount of architectural photography. But that's a quick snapshot of who I am and what I photograph, in addition, of course, to some of the teaching work that I do. So, Matt, maybe a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I've been a full-time professional photographer now for over 30 years. I started as a photojournalist. I was a photojournalist for 17 years. And then I was up in New England, moved out west in 2006, and have been a full-time fine art landscape and nature photographer. And I switched to Olympus about three years ago from the full frame world, and never looked back. Love the system. I became an Olympus educator a couple of years ago, and I do a lot of teaching. That's why I'm an Olympus educator, and I do a lot of field workshops and online teaching and whatnot, and love sharing my knowledge of photography and the Olympus system.
Excellent. Well, do we want to talk about some of the features on this? I know before we had an opportunity to chat, there's several things on here that are really important for both Matt and myself. And one of the things that might be overlooked to some extent is the fluorine protective lens coating. And I haven't shot it in the rain, but some of my work is close up with waterfalls and things of that, where water can easily get on the lens. And I have to tell you, I've noticed a significant improvement relative to that just kind of falling off. And that for me has been a real nice piece to this. And then I'll talk about the second item, and then Matt, maybe you can talk about the other couple here. But the other thing that I'm really enjoying when I open this lens up all the way is this beautiful feathered bokeh. And I'll share some examples of that as we move down on some of the slides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And, I'm loving that bokeh too. I mean, it is really nice and smooth, has a really great look to it when you're shooting wide open. And this lens is super sharp shooting wide open at 1.4. And it has a close focusing distance of 25 centimeters. And, you can get some really nice close-up shots. And I think Frank and I both have some examples of that in our slides that we'll show you. And I will mention the one thing that this is missing, and that is the manual focusing clutch. And, I know some people are a little surprised by that. Some people are a little, not happy with that. For me personally, I love the manual focusing clutch, but the way I do shoot a lot with manual focus, but I have my camera set up for rear focus, for rear autofocus, so that all I have to do is just let go of the autofocus button, and then I can just all of a sudden just manually focus. So missing the clutch is not a big, huge thing for me.
And I think to that point, Matt, there's always compromises in life. And somebody were to say, do you want me to make the lens smaller and not have the clutch, or do you want it bigger with the clutch? And for me, I'm voting, take the clutch out. I can put it on manual relatively easy. And again, back to the portability for me. That's just a real nice piece to it. And it'd be nice to have the clutch if there wasn't another sacrifice, but there is, so I'll take it this way.
I agree. right, I think we're going to start going on to photos. Yeah, so I did a little bit of traveling with this lens. I went up to Glacier National Park the other week. I was trying to chase the aurora, and it was supposed to happen that night. All the forecast was there, but unfortunately no aurora, but I still got some other good shots to share with you. And this was when I was trying to get the aurora, but this was a live composite that I did with my Mark III and this fabulous lens. Shot it at f2.8. This was 15-second intervals, ISO 200. It's a 20-minute total exposure, and I'm facing towards where the sun was setting. And so I love doing live composites, star trails at dusk, where you can get a little bit of that blue sky and even a little bit of glow on the horizon. And that's something that I love doing is shooting those live composites at that time. And so that's what we see here. Now, in the next shot, we're going to take a look at, now here's some showing that 25 centimeter focusing distance. I was probably a little bit further away from that, but shooting this at f2.0, almost wide open. I wanted to have a little bit of depth of field still in the in that foreground subject, but the ice crystals were just amazing. And you look at this photo at 100%, you can just see all the detail on that. And here's that first example that we're taking a look at of that feathered bokeh. Let's go ahead to the next one. This was something that I shoot a lot where I have the sun in my images and I'm trying to get a nice star effect. I think you do that a little bit too, Frank, don't you?
I definitely do. So there's a lot of similarities here.
So, of course, I'm going to be testing this out. And I mean, this is producing really, really nice star effects, sunburst effects. And this was shot at f14. F14, f16 is going to work really good with this lens. I actually found it to be producing a little bit better starburst than the 8-25, which is my favorite landscape lens. But yeah, fabulous, fabulous starburst effects. Let's go to the next one here. Now, on this one, I was using some filters. And so I'll talk a little bit about filters. I love using filters on my cameras. And if anyone has any questions about filters, feel free to send me a DM and I can answer your questions on those. This here, I was using a circular polarizing filter, a CPL, also a 10-stop solid neutral density filter, and a 5-stop graduated neutral density filter. This allowed me to slow my shutter speed down. And I'm shooting at f11, ISO 64, and I was able to do a 60-second exposure. And this made that water, the lake wasn't frozen yet, but it actually looks like that. It gave it a nice glass-like appearance to the water. And that's one thing that I love doing is, doing longer exposures. And I also love the Olympus system because it gives us a 60-second exposure. I think a lot of other cameras, they only allow 30 seconds before you then have to use a cable release. But that's how I shot this. And actually, we can take a look at this here. The 20mm lens features a 58mm filter thread. And so I have a adapter that's on there. And if you look closely, you can see that split neutral density filter and the solid neutral density filter inside that. And I think that was, let's go to the next one here. Okay, so this is showing off that f1.4 and that nice bokeh. And this is something that's that was interesting. I wanted to, when I was, tasked with doing this project, I wanted to shoot a little bit differently than I normally do with landscapes. Usually with landscapes, you're photographing and you have depth of field from right in front of you all the way out to infinity. And I wanted to see what this lens can do wide open and see if I can, do some other photos with a blurry background and see how that looked. And this was really neat, getting the icicles tack sharp and then having everything else in the background fall out of focus. And in the next photo that we're going to see here, almost a little bit of reverse in that this one here, the foreground is a little out of focus and the background is tack sharp. And again, I'm shooting at f1.4 wide open on this ISO 100 at 3200th of a second. And it's really nice. So it gives you that nice sort of zoom in. Yeah, we can zoom in on this image there. You can see how the foreground's a little soft, producing a window into the mountain in the background. And, couple that with the darkening around the corners and the light in the middle, gave me a really nice, interesting look to that image. And I think I have one more here for you too. Yeah, so this one here was, here I am using those filters again. And I'm using a 3-stop reverse grad. and also the 10-stop neutral density and the CPL. And this allowed me, again, a 60-second exposure. And what I used this for was to get the clouds, get the movement in the clouds, and also that milkiness in the water. Now, of course, we can also do live ND to get that milkiness in the water. And Frank's actually going to have some really cool images showcasing the cameras and the lens with the live ND.
Okay, well, speaking of that, that was a great segue.
How did I know that was coming up?
that was pretty good. So anyway, one of the things, first of all, let me say, Matt, your work is great. I enjoy it. And I have to tell you that I'm extremely jealous where you live. I wish I could walk out to the door and be at some of those amazing places in a very short period of time. I can be at some amazing places, but I got to travel a little bit further than you do. But anyway, just really nice things that you have there. So, unlike Matt in that regard on the filters, first of all, I do use filters periodically, but I've learned to utilize the filtering systems within the camera systems for me, and I've really found that to be helpful, particularly in some challenging environments. And I'll use this as an example. Saw this beautiful water cascading over this log just last week, as Michelle mentioned, just photographed this. And I thought, I could grab my filters out of my bag and so forth. But wait a minute, we've got this incredible, internal live ND system built right into the camera. And one, I don't need to get my tripod out. Two, I don't need to get the filter out. And three, is the results are, for me, extremely pleasing and ultimately what I'm after. And so what I did with this lens is I wanted to put it through its paces and test it with respect to some of the built-in features that we have in the camera to see how it would perform. And again, back to that earlier question about what about the focal length? Is it one that would work well for me? And again, I'm finding this to be really, really an important element, particularly since it's relatively close to what, are the human eye sees. Anyway, in this case here, you can see I'm at 0.6 seconds. At f3.5, I'm using the EM1 Mark III on this, which, some of the live ND features are also in some of the other cameras. But I was very happy with the focal length, happy with the results of it. And I mentioned earlier about getting the camera lens close. I did some closer up ones where getting water on the front element here, not a problem, came right off. And I'm thinking that new coating is really going to work well on that. So let's look at the next one here. This is an old mill. Did some hiking around the perimeter of Valley Forge National Park last week, and just a beautiful place that a lot of people don't realize that if you're so inclined, there's hiking trails around the park, even though the bulk of the people that visited are in the main areas, and there's some hidden gems throughout this area. But in any event, I came across this, and I immediately thought, all right, let's slow that water down. How do I do that? I can grab my filters out of the bag. I can grab my tripod off my backpack. But I tell you what, if I can do it that easily, I'm going to take that option first. And I am not disappointed, and I'm not sacrificing anything in any way. And you can see I shot this at f8, so I've got pretty good depth of field. And this masonry structure you see in the foreground on the lower right, all the way back to the beautiful fall leaves. You see everything is tack sharp and handheld. Again, if somebody told me a few years ago that I was going to be doing these handheld, I'd say, there's no way, it's a gimmick or whatever. But I'm here to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that is not the case. And more, I'm able to leave some additional things at home and not have to schlep them with me. So another feature, and I'll move on to the next slide, excuse me, is that I'm using the high resolution mode. So Michelle, if we could go to that next slide and share that with you. And maybe we're having, there we go. This is also an opportunity that I'm finding more and more where I'm shooting high resolution 50 megapixel imagery. And in some of my professional work that I do, I have to make some significantly large imagery, and so finding more and more that to be very helpful. And it's also not a sacrifice in any way. And this is another mill near the Valley Forge Park that has been abandoned for many years. And what first caught my eye here is looking at that opening in the back, kind of like a little portal in there. Actually, somebody wrote inside on the wall that was the portal to hell. And I thought, well, thank God it's not working. And plus, they didn't spell it right. But what caught my eye was the water that's trickling over there. And look at the beautiful colors of the fall leaves that you see in the foreground. And I thought to myself, how do I capture this again? And the beauty with high res is that you also can get, that milky effect in the water without having to use a really, really slow shutter, because it's merging multiple images together. And you can see that I did this at a 1/6 of a second, and I'm keeping my ISO at its native 200 here. And just really happy with, that as an option that I have, particularly in a situation where if it's client-based work, I have the ability to deliver, a pretty significant file size if I need to. So moving on to the next one. And you heard Matt talk about the close aspect of this, equated to kind of our system. This is I can get about as close as 9 inches to my subject matter. And since it is fall, looking for opportunities like this, excuse me. And I thought, well, let's see how this can perform in a high resolution mode, and at the same time, a semi macro shot, and incorporating the feathered bokeh. So I'm getting 3 benefits out of this one shot, with the fact that I have the ability to use this lens, paired with the the Olympus camera. And you can see I'm at 250th of a second. I'm wide open at the 1.4, and look at the background. I mean, I'm just so pleased. And part of an objective as a photographer is to help direct our viewers, our audience, as to where we want the eye to go. And hopefully it's going right to that one. I don't think it's an acorn or whatever that is there, but that's the main star of the show. And by having the ability to shoot this wide open, I'm able to help direct where I want my viewer's eye to go. So again, in essence, with this image alone, I'm getting the benefit of 3 features that I would be challenged to potentially do with some other components of it. So moving on here, I think we're going back to Matt, and another favorite place of mine. So Matt, take it away.
Those were some great images, and I love. I think we also have a similar style, somewhat in post processing too. And I see you're a fan of vignetting as well, adding vignettes. Yes. And I love that too. Do that to a lot of my photos, and it brings the eye in, brings the viewer right into the photo. And so you had some great post processing on those excellent shots. So this was up here in Yellowstone, and this was one of the hot springs. So I got some steam coming off the hot springs, and it was windy that day too. So that steam is just coming right up, and I was getting soaked with the steam. My camera lens was getting all wet, and I would just wait for the steam to pass, and then let the lens dry off. Wait for a couple minutes, and the water would come off the lens. And then start shooting again. And I think this lens too is really good for, if you're looking for more fine art photography type things, trying to do something, having a fixed focal length lens, I think is it's really fun. And it's, oh boy, I don't know. It's a little bit more challenging, but a zoom lens is nice and versatile, but then having a fixed focus lens, it almost makes you think a little bit more about your composition and your framing. And, you have to physically move forward or step back away from your shot. And I think it's if someone hasn't photographed with a fixed focal length, I really recommend getting one and just shooting with that for a week or two and see the images that you come up with. And I'd be interested to hear if it does improve your photography a little bit. What are your thoughts on that, Frank, with the fixed focus?
Well, I am an advocate of prime lenses because of that. And I think it forces you to slow down. It forces you to look at that composition. And as you've done such a great job with this image here, a lot of times our temptation is to just stay in that location, zoom in or out, but there's different components to that impact the image. And so I am in the total agreement with you. I like the aspect of having to slow down and then myself be the one that moves. And the image you have here, Matt, I think is a good representation of that, really good representation.
Okay, we'll go to the next one here, also photographed at that same spot, and breaking a couple rules here, having the horizon in the middle a little bit and the tree dead center. But I'm sure, Frank, you'd agree with me. Once you know the rules, you can then sort of have a little bit of freedom to break them a little bit
Absolutely.
too on your composition. And I really liked the drama in this image, and I went with a real high contrast post processing on this. And actually, I think it'd probably be interesting to let people know I've been using Capture One Pro for the most part on almost all of these images, and some of the black and whites I did in Capture One Pro, but also use Silver Effects 3 for some of the black and white conversions. What are you using on the post processing for the images we're seeing today?
I am a big fan of Lightroom, and I have to tell you, with the recent announcement, with the ability to do some of the layers with the different masking capabilities, it's, for me, I would say 70 to 80% of my imagery now is done within in Lightroom alone, and I may need to take it a step or two into Photoshop after that. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Lightroom.
Okay. Let's go to the next one. This one here I shot in handheld high res. Like Frank, I'm a big fan of the high res modes on Olympus, and I shoot in them very often. This was handheld 1/60th of a second, f5 at ISO 200. And Frank mentioned a couple of the benefits of shooting in high res mode, and I'll add on a couple more. That you end up getting, usually it seems like almost a stop to 2 stops less noise in the high res modes that I seem to be getting. So I get less noise when I'm shooting in the high res mode. And then the other thing is too, in particular with this image here, I was comparing this to some of the other images that I did not shoot in the high res mode, and I had a slight improvement in color, a little bit more color available to me to adjust the colors and get this photo perfect. So shooting in the high res mode was absolutely perfect for this shot. And you also get, I think you get a little bit more shadow detail and highlight detail too, because it's stacking all those images together. So yeah, definitely big fan of the high res mode. And let's go to the next one here. Now, I know there's a bunch of astrophotographers out there that are interested in how this works with the night sky, and I love shooting night sky. I do a lot of night sky workshops, and I'll tell you what, this lens is really, really nice. This was shot wide open. This was Old Faithful again during an eruption. 15 seconds, f1.4, ISO 3200. So again, wide open, the stars are sharp. I am noticing just the smallest bit of coma in the very, very edges. And you see that in pretty much every lens. There is just a small amount of chromatic aberration that easily gets filtered out if you're using, I'm using Capture One Pro, but Lightroom, you can filter that out too. But yeah, I'm looking forward to next year's Milky Way season to bring this lens out and get some really nice night sky shots with this lens. But yeah, I'm really impressed with shooting this wide open on the night sky with the stars.
All right, so let's talk about that feathered bokeh. So I thought to myself, let's see if we can't put this to the test and do some examples of maybe where you can see it a little bit more pronounced. And this is just a simple Adirondack chair where a leaf fell on the arm. And I thought, well, this would be the ideal scenario. And as I said, I'm shooting wide open at 1.4. And you can see behind the arm of the other chair the beautiful bokeh and the soft effect that this lens is creating. So I did quite a few tests on it with different subject matters, and I have to tell you, for the most part, it's very consistent. And I'm getting the results that I was hoping for. And I did see in a couple of the chats that were coming in, what was the comparison with the 1.8 versus the 1.2? Is there much of a difference? And again, with those minor changes, there's not a whole lot that is that visible to me. And for what I'm trying to accomplish, this 1.4 I think is a real sweet in between not focal length, but aperture setting that just works really, really well. So let's take a look at the next one here, and then I'll let you start to decide. Here's some. This was an extremely bright day, and you'll see my shutter speed there. I'm at 8 thousandths of a second, and I even had to drop the ISO down to 1/25th so I could get a 1.4 on it. But again, that's some of the beauty of the system here, is it allows me that versatility to be able to accomplish that. But again, beautiful background. You can see where the blue sky was. I did a spot meter, so I just metered right for that one yellow berry and then the red berries that fell into place there. So again, as I look at these more and more with the intent of trying, as I said earlier, as being a director, if you will, as a photographer, you want your audience eye to go immediately to what your primary subject is. And I think without any hesitation, hopefully your eye goes right to that part that's tack sharp and then allows you to kind of wander into the rest of the image. I think there's another one here that I have that we could look at. Here's an early morning shot where, similar to what Matt was saying, he likes to shoot into the sun. I do too. And in this particular case, I saw, what caught my eye was that water droplet that was hanging there, and I, got a little, starburst off the edge of it there, and the camera, the lens paired with the camera, I'm able to catch that right out of the gate without any hesitation. And again, the benefit to this is I wanted you to see the fact that I was shooting into the sun. I exposed, of course, right for that water droplet that you see. But again, take a minute and look at the background. And the more I'm using this wide open, the more I'm enjoying this beautiful feathered bokeh that you're seeing around the perimeter of this. So again, from the standpoint of, that's that part of the capabilities of this lens, there's absolutely no hesitation in my mind that this is a winner in that regard. And to the earlier comment that Matt made about using your feet to move in and out, not a problem. And again, I don't have to immediately switch out to a macro lens in a situation like this. I'm probably, again, about 9 inches away from this in order to get right in there with no problems at all.
And you got a sunburst at f1.4.
Yep. How about that, huh? Somebody said, well, did you do that in post? It's like, no, that's the way it was. But again, Mother Nature was very cooperative with where that light beam was hitting it. So talking about, other opportunities with the lens. So if you're in a situation where all of a sudden you realize you want more of a landscape shot, I can switch out lenses, or I can take a series of vertical panoramas. And in this case, this is also at Valley Forge, one of the battlefields here. I have a total of 7 stitched vertical images here that I wanted you to see the arch of that cloud horizon in the background there. And I would have struggled even at my widest focal length, which is 7mm or 14mm full frame equivalent. So I'm able to accomplish that. I just need to think a little bit, how do I do that with the tools that I have? And, immediately I thought about doing a panorama. And again, I was pretty happy with the results of this. This is actually how that sky was in that arch fashion, because you can see the foreground is relatively level with, what Mother Nature delivered there. So very, very pleased with that. And, once I stitched it, and by the way, I did stitch it in Lightroom, and again, the new algorithms that they're producing has given me some, pretty nice opportunities in that regard. And, you be the judge, but here's the result of 7 images put together utilizing this lens. And so it's a great file that I end up with on this.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you had this image, Frank, because and you bring up such an awesome point. And I think people do forget about this sometimes, is that you can stitch images to get that wider shot, to get that landscape shot. I had seen some posts in some of the comments, and they're like, well, I shoot landscape, so this 20mm is not going to be any good for me. And, I think we've been showing right now that for landscape work, this can be really good. And when you need to go wider, yeah, you don't have to go and grab that wider angle lens. You can do this, you can stitch a panorama and get that wider field of view. Okay, so on this next section here, this is sort of around home in Bozeman, Montana. And wanted to walk through not just, I have a couple landscapes, but I also have some other things too that I wanted to share with you, just, in different uses of this lens and what you can do with that. My fiance, she's a professional fine art painter. And so she was in the studio doing some clear coating on one of her paintings. And I was like, oh, hey, this could make a great shot. And so this is wide open at f1.4. And, you could just see that narrow band of focus right where the paintbrush is, and everything else just going out of focus. And that feathered bokeh is just amazing. I love the rendering on the out of focus sections of this image. And let's go to the next one here too. The this 20 millimeter lens. This is a fun focal length where you can get some details, come in a little bit closer to your subject and look for interesting details and patterns in your subject. Now, I photographed this mill from a distance away, and I got the whole mill in the photo, and it was just a static, building shot. And then it was once I started moving in closer to it with that 20 millimeter lens, physically moving in. I couldn't have done this zooming in. I had to physically move in to get that. Then I saw this interesting shapes and angles and all that just gave a really nice, interesting look to this mill for me. Let's go ahead to the next one. And again, I touched on this before, but looking, with this lens now, I'm looking again for more ways where I can isolate my subject and then get the background blurry. And now I have some sunlight, late evening sunlight hitting this grass in the foreground here, which helps isolate it. I'm shooting at f1.4. I was probably about maybe 5 feet away from the grass, so I wasn't super close. So the background isn't completely out of focus, but it is soft enough to then separate my background from my foreground to really draw you in. And really, I wanted to share, just that crispness of that last sunlight on the grass, and this worked perfectly for me. And actually, I also want to mention something too, and I'm probably going to assume that you're the same way, Frank. But all of the shots that you're seeing, outside of me doing a crop into a square, you're pretty much looking at everything full frame. So I
absolutely
crop in post. So I'm always trying to get it full frame out there. And so yeah, you're the same way, Frank.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so this is my fiance Whitney, and we were walking around the university. That's our shadows on the right hand side. So I thought that was a fun little add to the shot. And, this can be a really nice lens for environmental portraits. I used to do a lot of portrait photography. I don't anymore. I'm more landscape, but it's still fun getting the, doing some portraits every once in a while. And the next slide here, we have a close-up of this, of the shot. And her eye is just crystal clear sharp. This was shot with the EM10 Mark IV, and it's, I think I had it on the eye focus. It nailed the autofocus, but you can see just, her glasses in the front are soft. Her nose is soft. The ear is soft. And, the background, just really nice look to that, and just super, super sharp. Let's go to the next one here. And this is for those street photographers for you out there. I did a little bit of street photography. I'm not a street photographer, even though I was a photojournalist for 17 years. I've done a lot of photos on the street. I usually, when I was doing photojournalism and I was doing this type of work, I used to love using long glass. So this was fun, just walking around downtown Bozeman, using the 20 millimeter and seeing what I can come up with. And so this was shot wide open at 1.4, 60th of a second at ISO 640. And I know a lot of street photographers do prefer this focal length. And, it goes back to that whole rangefinder type of a focal length. And so I could totally see this being a really favorite lens for street photographers, especially because it's a small lens. So you're not being very visible when you're out on the street walking around taking pictures, taking candids like this. And of course, this it's so small you can carry it into the restaurant with you. And why mess around with your iPhone and take a photo when you have a fabulous lens here that can focus really close and give you, just hardly any depth of field, and photograph your burger and some beer afterwards while you're out done photographing. And I got one more here for you too. And because of the portability, and it's Olympus, it's all break free, and carry the camera around with you because it is so small. Going to the family bonfire, and this was handheld. This was with the M10 Mark IV 2-second exposure. So I got you beat by a little bit there, Frank, on the
yes, you do.
and at 1.4, so handheld. And just a side note, I did shoot the Milky Way the other year with my 8 millimeter fisheye at 10 seconds handheld. So that's been my record for a long handheld. But
you win the prize. You win the prize.
But now this, this is fantastic just being able to shoot at this wide open and, with those long exposures and, just take photos, everyday photos. It doesn't have to be, the ones that you're going to print on the wall and, sell to people and everything like that, but just going out and having fun with the camera and with the lens. And that's what I think this lens is, a really good lens to keep on your camera and just walk around and see what you can come up with.
All right, so speaking of low light, and before I jump into this, I did see one of the questions in the chat box about the pano that I did, whether or not that was on a tripod or handheld. And let me share with you that when I'm doing instructional work, I tell everybody use a tripod. And I will tell you that I am bad at keeping, on my own rules, because more and more I am shooting these handheld, and the panorama you saw was handheld. I'm very careful. I brace my arms typically when I'm doing that, since I know I'm going to do that. And it is the right way to do it with a tripod. But full disclosure, I did not use a tripod. So let's talk about low light. And I live very close to DeSales University. It's a Catholic college right down from where I live. And they have a lot of these statues and so forth around the area. So I thought I would do is test out this, how the low light capabilities are with this thing. And these are very, very dimly lit statues. And as you can see here, I'm focused on her fingertips there. I'm at wide open again at 1.4, and my ISO's up at 640. Because I'm able to shoot it at 1.4, I'm not at a 2.8 or a 4.0. Again, giving me so much more versatility, particularly in situations where I'm dealing with low light. So on this next slide, this is the campus there, and again, more to what I'm used to in the landscape mode, if you will, and the architectural arena. Again, shooting right down a walkway there to what is the cafeteria there. And you'll notice on these series images, I'm using the OMD M5. Again, a great camera that I have this probably with me, whenever I'm even just out taking the dog for a walk. It's a very, very portable and versatile camera. I'm shooting ISO 4000, not a lot of grain, and just happy with the way these things are turning out. Let's go to the next one here and talk about focus bracketing. So again, as you can tell, I like to utilize the modes that we have, but at the same time, I'm also careful to tell people, composition is still paramount. Don't get hung up on the technology. Let technology be a tool to help you achieve the good results that you are ultimately after with your composition. This is I actually had perspective correction because I'm shooting down a little bit on it, but these are 3 bracketed shots. I'm at f5 at a 25th of a second, no problems hand holding that and doing the post-processing. Sometimes I do it in post, sometimes I'll do it right within the camera. So again, choice is yours, but I like a little more control. I'm a little more anal in that regard. So a lot of what I do in that is that because I want to keep the raw images, I'll do that in post. Moving to the next one here. This is also bracketed. These are 5 shots. This was down at Saucon Park, where, again, not too far from where I live, and I wanted to get up early, capture that beautiful frost that you see on both the leaves and the grass. But I'm, again, 9 inches away, and I'm shooting. You can see my aperture at 3.2 there. So it's kind of a compromise, again, what we talked about earlier. And I've got 5 shots here that I processed in post, and I challenge you to find any section of that in the main feature that's out of focus. And this lens, again, at the risk of redundancy here, for some things that I would normally use a macro lens on, I'm no longer having to switch that out, and the results are just surpassing my expectations, I guess is an easy way to say that. This next shot here, again, back to that we said earlier about shooting into the sun. I purposely wanted to find that shot where there's a series of these leaves all covered with frost, as is the grass. This one is a little longer distance, so I knew I needed a few more shots to accomplish the full depth of field. And in this case, you can see I'm using 10 bracketed shots. ISO 1.4, and because I'm into the sun, I'm shooting at 800th of a second. So again, the point of all of that with the focus bracketing, just checking and testing the other modes to see how it would work and perform with this lens. And I got to tell you, I give it an A+ in that regard. It just has worked out real well. So moving on, I want to share some, just some general shots, from the trail, so to speak. As I'm an outdoorsman, as I mentioned earlier, I love to be out and about. So I have some images here that I'd like to share with you. This also is right outside of Valley Forge Park. This is an old abandoned mill, and you saw that one high-res shot that I took that was actually inside of this structure up on the upper right. But again, just beautiful time of the year to be out and about, all these amazing colors. And to a point that both Matt and I mentioned before, relative to using your feet to be that zoom. Again, when I'm shooting situations like this and I know what my lens is, my brain starts to wire to the focal length that I'm with. And so again, I'm just moving about, getting the right distance to or from my subject. And again, at 5.6, the bulk of this whole image is in tack sharp. So really happy with that. On to the next slide here. I'm in an abandoned old spring house. This is actually 3 bracketed shots because I wanted you to see some of the detail on the interior perimeter of that wall, and yet still not have the exterior blown out. And with the ultimate objective of giving you as much depth of field. And at f8 on this thing here, I'm getting pretty much the wall, the trees, and all the way back to the sky in focus with 3 exposure bracketed shots. Moving on to the next one here. This too is also as a challenge, and one of the things that for many of you that know me, if there's a puddle or an opportunity for reflection, I'm looking for a photo op here. And this is this beautiful old structure also outside of Valley Forge that is some kind of winter's cellar or whatever it is, and it's probably a couple hundred years old. And I saw the puddle, and I saw the door, and I saw the archway, and I said, this needs to be photographed. And again, back to that question about the focal length, I had to move to or from a couple times to get it just the way I wanted to, but it was absolutely no problem. And at f8, everything is tack sharp, foreground, midground, and all the way back through the background. So next shot here, again, tail end of fall in the Northeast here. And similar to one of the images that Matt had at the beginning of his slide is where there's an opportunity for a starburst, peeking through the leaves. I'm going to do that. At f16, it just performed beautifully for me. I'm at 100th of a second, so I got plenty of light to capture everything that I need to here. And where possible, again, I'm always trying to put a little bit of that nice starburst in there. And at f16, it literally just shined right through there for me. So moving on to the next slide, I was in Egypt last week. I'm being sarcastic. People say, what's the pyramid here? So there's a trail near me where it's a religious group, apparently, that it's actually on private property. So I try to be a little sensitive to that there's a series of these that from a photographer's standpoint, it's a fun place to photograph. And again, the fact if I need to be nimble and quick, I have got a 20 millimeter on me that is not obtrusive, and I'm finding no challenges with getting the composition that I want with this lens. And again, part of it, as I said, I think it's closer to what our human eye sees, which works really, really well for me. And again, sarcastically, I tell people I was in some foreign country when I show this imagery, and when in essence, it's only about half an hour from where I live here. So no, I was not in Egypt. So moving on to the next slide. Wait for that to transition over. Whoop, back up just one, if I may, for a minute. So Matt, I have to tell you, you put me in a very awkward position, and I thought I would share this with everybody because, Matt shared some nice pictures of his fiance. my wife's going to look at this presentation and go, well, isn't that great? Matt has shared his fiance. And what do you do, Frank? You show a picture of our dog. So apologies for that in advance. But Cooper is a new member of our family, and I've already trained him to be a good hiking dog and a good photo assistant. So I thought, this would be a good slide to end on. And he was cooperative for me to get the shot. I'm at F4 and again, getting the beautiful fall leaves all around him. So apologies to my wife that I didn't include her, and we'll just leave it that Cooper is pretty happy with this. So with that being said, Michelle, I guess we come back to you. And I guess you want to talk about the features. And I guess since mine's on the top, I'll jump in here real quick, and then Matt, you can add to it. Michelle asked us to identify 3 of what are probably one of the most important features to this lens that we've experienced, having used this for a relatively short period of time, but enough time to develop some good insight into this. And for me, again, at the risk of redundancy, the portability and size of this is just phenomenal. And, like Matt said, you can go into a diner or a restaurant, put this thing in your pocket literally, and have that flexibility and end up with a quality lens. And, that's the next thing that's on my bullet point here is the quality and that beautiful feathered bokeh. I mean, it's just an amazing tool. And since, we're both outdoors guys, the weather resistance component of it is just an amazing added benefit. So Matt, with that said, I'll let you jump into your 3 pieces here.
Okay. I had to mention, I laughed on one of the comments from Trish. She said, finally, a dog photo. I knew that's all we had to do. I mean, I got a couple blue healers here. We could have just saved a lot of mileage and just shot from home and got a whole lot of cool dog photos. We'll have to do a presentation just on dog photos. So again, I've touched on this all throughout the presentation here. The image quality and bokeh, the image quality is just fantastic. This is really sharp lens. I saw in the comments, I think it was from John, he was asking, where's the sweet spot in terms of the sharpness on this is a f2.8, and I don't know. I'll leave the lab tests for DxO and things like that, but I've shot from 1.4 to f16, and I have not seen any difference in sharpness. What do you think about that, Frank?
Absolutely agree. And it is pretty incredible with that.
Mm-hmm. The focal length. This was fun shooting at 20 millimeters and just being stuck with that. And Frank, you made a great point that I love this fact too, and it's amazing how our brain works. You said your brain all of a sudden got wired into that 20 millimeters, and you start seeing, if you're photographing with a particular lens for a while, you end up seeing that millimeter, and you see shots with that millimeter. And for the last 10 days or so, I've been shooting nothing but this 20 millimeter lens, and that's all I'm seeing. I'm just seeing all these images that can just be made from that focal length. And so, again, same as my old film rangefinder, which I used to love back in the film days. And lastly, the build quality and water resistance. I'm out in some, I'm out in snow, I'm out in rain, fog, steam, all that stuff. So being able to go out and not have to be limited with my gear, and being able to go out and get the shot and not worry about my gear breaking down, that's key for me. So.
Ditto. Michelle, are you coming back to us?
Hi, everybody.
She's back.
I came back. Oh, my heater just kicked on. Sorry. My studio is really cold, actually, which is surprising because everybody that watches this show in the summer knows that I sweat to death out here in the studio, and now I'm like under a blanket freezing. So, so I'm going to go ahead and remove this presentation, and why don't we take a look at some of the questions that maybe we didn't answer. Somebody asked if the lens hood was included, and Matt made me take that out of the slide. Yes, the lens hood is included with this lens. It's actually the same lens hood for the 12 to 45 too. Which actually leads me to a question about the filter size, which is 58 millimeter. It's the same size as the 12 to 45 f4 lens, exact same build size. Somebody asked about the weight compared to the 1.2 primes. Matt, do you think you could show us one more time the comparisons and maybe talk about the weight a little?
go ahead and switch over here. So I got, this is the 20 millimeter right here, and grab this. This is the 17 millimeter. And I saw that comment too, you know, can you really notice the weight difference? And you can definitely notice the weight difference. And I mean, look at the size difference in this too. So, you know, for 3 more millimeters, the size difference is really a huge, and there is definitely a weight difference too. And so you're putting this on a, you know, an EM10 Mark IV or even your EM3, you are going to notice that, you know, the front of the lens or the, you know, the front of your camera isn't going to be as forward heavy. Really good for street photography and for hiking. When I was doing the hiking in Glacier National Park in the winter snow and ice, just having that around my neck, you know, it was definitely freeing. Now, of course, I had a backpack with a whole bunch of other lenses that I did not even use on that hike, but just having that out there, I could totally see using this 20 millimeter and just going out for day hikes just with this one lens.
Nice. Okay. Somebody also asked how it felt on the EM10, and Matt, I know that you shot with that camera, right?
Yeah. Actually, I got my EM10 right here. Let me go back and switch over here and throw that on for you. And this is really fun. So, I mean, it is just perfect for the EM10 in particular. I love the small body, and with this small lens, and actually I got my old Canonette rangefinder right here, so you can even see the difference in size here. The EM10 is actually a little bit smaller than that old film rangefinder camera, but both 40 millimeter lenses. This one's a lot faster. This one was a 1.7, obviously this one being 1.4, but when I was walking around Bozeman with this that day and, you know, going into the restaurant and everything, you know, people weren't looking at me like, oh, who's this big fancy photographer walking around taking pictures? You know, I was just pretty much ignored with this tiny little camera, and that was really freeing and enabled me to get the shots.
So Frank, there was a question way up at the top. I can't find it right now, but somebody wanted to know if you knew the exact trail in Valley Forge that you were on so they could go explore it.
Absolutely. And the name of the trail is a little misleading because it's called the Mount Misery Trail. And the irony of it is it's located on Mount Joy. So go figure. It's Mount Misery on Mount Joy. And you can Google it or do all trails. And it's a beautiful trail, and you absolutely should check it out if you live nearby there. It's beautiful. And again, most people don't even realize it exists because they just go to the park, the main park, and not some of the perimeter trails.
Nice. Somebody did ask, and I don't know if either one of you did, do you guys use art filters at all? Have you tried this lens with the art filters?
Yeah, I actually did. I'm sorry, Frank. I did a little bit. I didn't have any in the presentation, but it worked fine with the art filters. There's a couple of the gritty black and white ones that I like using. But yeah, I was using it on the EM10 and worked perfectly fine with the art filters.
And ditto to that, I like the black and white, the dramatic tone. That's one of my favorite filters. But since Michelle said we had to keep the presentation under 4 hours, that I couldn't add too many more images there. But again, for me, that's a favorite filter of mine. I love it, and it performs well with this lens.
Oh, everybody always blames me. Sure, Frank. So I can answer this one really quick. Do any other Olympus lenses have the feathered bokeh? So yes, all of the F1.2 primes, so the 25 millimeter, the 17 millimeter, and the 45 millimeter prime all feature that feathered bokeh that you see in this lens. So it's nice to see it in such a small lens this time.
Absolutely.
I'm going through, I want to make sure I get everyone because there were a couple questions back at the top, and you already answered the panorama. And
I see one from Karen about astrophotography. Yes, you can definitely use this for astrophotography. I did have I had a live comp earlier in the presentation, so watch on the replay, live comp of some star trails, and then also a shot of Old Faithful erupting at night with the stars in the background, shot wide open at 1.4, worked fabulous for it.
Yeah, I've used the 17 1.8 before for some Milky Way stuff, so I'm curious to try out the 20 millimeter. And when Milky Way season comes back, it's cloud season now, so can't really see the stars too well. Well, I think we've kind of wrapped up some of the questions. If you have more questions, we will answer them in the comment section. We always try to get back to you guys. And I definitely want to say thanks to Matt and Frank for taking my request to go photograph this camera in less than a week and help me put together a presentation to share with all of you. So great work, guys, working on that deadline. That was amazing. And thank you for being on the show, as always. And if you missed it at the beginning, hit the replay. We also have their websites and their Instagram pages if you want to follow them. They always love new followers, I'm sure, right, guys?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I am going to give you guys back the rest of your evening. And thank you again for joining us. Again, this will be available for replay. And we just thank you so much for joining us and learning all about our brand new, very first OM system lens. We're very excited to embark on this new adventure. And we thank you for coming along with us.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much, Frank. Great work there. And yeah, it was fun doing this presentation with you.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. Thank you. It was fun, Matt, to do that. Just, I got to get to my wife.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, she's going to need to be in the next presentation. All right.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Have a great night, everyone. And sorry, Frank.
No,
did you have
real pleasure. Thank you. Real pleasure.
Awesome. Bye.
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Bye now.